U of M bringing home the college basketball national championship last night. Their second in program history, first since 1989, taking down the University of Connecticut, UConn. So this now allows us an opportunity with how dominant this U of M team was this year. We can start asking the questions of where does this team rank all time? And there's a couple different factors in my eyes that goes into this. And the most glaring one, which we'll discuss a little bit more in a bit, is the NIL and the transfers and all of that. That does play a bit of a factor in considering where to rank these teams. So, first and foremost, I don't think anybody can quite top the... I think if this U of M team went undefeated, which there was a real chance that they could have, if they went undefeated, maybe at most one loss, I think they could have had a chance, but I don't think you're passing those John Wood and UCLA teams of the late 60s, early 70s. You're not going to do it. Had a couple of undefeated teams in there. Don't think you're going to pass that. Or the undefeated 76 Indiana team, which, funny enough, ended up beating Michigan in a championship that year. I don't think you're going to quite crack that. Which, looking at the three losses for Michigan this year, you had Duke, you had Wisconsin, and then you had Purdue in the Big Ten championship. Which, of course, two of those three teams, Purdue and Duke, are great teams. Wisconsin being the outlier. Now, if you take that Wisconsin loss away, this is a 38-2 team. I think it probably moves up in that regard, but I think hypothetically, if you beat Purdue in that Big Ten championship as well, let's give you the only loss of Duke. Duke beating you in the regular season, that's your only loss. I think then you have a chance in that aspect. But the three losses, two of those three losses being to some excellent teams, still very good. Very good. I mean, that's probably an understatement. That's the dominance that we saw from this Michigan team this season is quite impressive. But looking at some other dominant teams since that time, looking in the 90s, of course, you got the 1992 Duke Blue Devils featuring Christian Laettner, Bobby Hurley, Grant Hill, and some iconic moments as well. The Christian Laettner shot against Kentucky specifically. That one's definitely up there, 34-2 being that season. So that one's got to be up there. And then also in the 90s, you had Kentucky, 95-96, featuring 9 future NBA players. You're going to be hard-pressed to find a singular college roster that has much more loaded top-to-bottom talent than that. Featuring the likes of Tony Delk, Antoine Walker, Ron Mercer. So I think those two teams, you could probably argue, along with some of those UCLA teams, Indiana teams that went undefeated, along with that 96 Kentucky team, 92 Duke team, you could argue that's a pretty solid top 5 right there. Now, with a lot of college teams to choose from, obviously that's, could be some debates going on in there. But I think that's a pretty solid, in my eyes, top 5 that we can have. But moving on, more recent memory. Starting with 2000, of course, why that year is significant. That was not only the last Michigan State national championship, but also the last, until last night, Big Ten national championship for men's basketball. Michigan State that year, 32-7. I don't know, with those 7 losses, I don't know. It's hard for me to put them over this current iteration, this Michigan State, this current Michigan team. Excuse me. So I don't know. I'm going to have to put Michigan over them. Looking since then, some other teams. 2001, the following year, Duke Blue Devils 35-4, pretty strong team that year, featuring a lot of NBA talent. Carlos Boozer, Shane Battier, Jay Williams, Mike Dunleavy. Just in terms of that top end talent too, it's hard to overlook this Corey Brewer. How could you forget Corey Brewer? Side note, with the Denver Nuggets, he was with the Denver Nuggets in 2012, 2013, and he had a little fan club of Nuggets fans called the Brew Crew. He was a fun player to watch, and especially NBA players. Ty Lawson, also future Denver Nugget. Tyler Hansbrough, one of those players that was great at the college level but never could quite break through at the NBA level in terms of being a star-level player. And then you've also got some other great teams in the last 15 years, specifically 2012, Kentucky with Anthony Davis and Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, a couple of early NBA lottery draft picks, and Anthony Davis, obviously a superstar player, future Hall of Famer. I kind of threw up in my mouth a little bit saying that, but that's mostly considering Anthony Davis's injury history and his history with the LA Lakers. And then in a more recent sense, just 2 years ago, UConn. They also, like this current Michigan team, went 37-3. Some recent dominance in there as well. Now, that said, how do we rank these recent teams? How do we do this? Can we stake the claim that potentially this current iteration, this current Michigan team that just brought home the national championship, how are they looking in terms of at least the recent teams? Or even, as I mentioned, maybe we consider them 4 or 5 in terms of the all-time, which I mentioned, the 92 Duke Blue Devils and the 96 Kentucky Wildcats. Great story. He is playing 3 years of junior. Very good stuff. So we'll have to see. But, I mean, you can't really surpass the Kentucky team in terms of NBA-level talent. I mentioned 9 NBA players. You also have 6 NBA players off of that 92 Duke team. Going to be pretty tough to match there. And then also looking at some of the other teams moving on from that point as well in recent history. That Michigan State championship team, that had 4 NBA. Jay Williams, Shane Battier. And then 2012, Kentucky, with a whopping 7 NBA players. A lot of those players going in the lottery as well. Anthony Davis, Michael Kidd-Gilchrist being the two main ones on that. Even 2 years ago, that UConn team, that's an underrated player right there with the San Antonio Spurs. A lot of NBA talent off of that 2009 UNC team. So I think that could be a good barometer too, is in terms of the individual talent. How much NBA talent are you setting? And the common theme with all these top end teams that I've mentioned have a lot of NBA players coming from those teams, usually at least 4 or 5 NBA players on these teams. And obviously this year, you've got Yaxel Lendeborg, who's going to be a lottery pick. But looking ahead, I think Adai Mara, Elliot Cadeau, Morez Johnson, I think they have good chances at making it into the NBA. And then even Trey McKinney, freshman. He's got some NBA potential as well. So we'll see. I think we have a chance to have, 4 or 5 NBA players off of this mission. Marinate a little bit. This has to be a few years. Let these players go through. These players, Yaxel guaranteed going to be in the NBA draft this upcoming draft. But beyond that, going to be some more time. But however, we can make the case with the run that this Michigan team went on. Potentially we could make the claim of most dominant tournament run. Their only close game being that national championship game. But the first 5 games scoring over 90 points, all of them double-digit wins. I mean, you can make that case that this Michigan team had potentially the most dominant NCAA tournament. Not to say that any of those other teams didn't have dominant NCAA tournaments either, but I think there could be a case made there. I probably should have looked a little bit more ahead of time at some of the individual teams in their tournament runs. I wanted to focus more on some of the talent, overall records of those teams. But I don't know. We'll have to see, and I think a big part of this that you have to consider is the whole NIL thing. And the reason I say that is because all the previous aforementioned teams, how it's been previously before the last few years with mass transfers. You had to homegrown these teams. It's all recruiting. And I think when you have a homegrown team versus a team that basically all of your primary players are transfers, it's a little bit of a different feel. And with no limits with NIL money, it's no secret this Michigan team paid big for this team this year. And you look at the key players on this Michigan team. Yaxel Lendeborg, transfer. Roddy Gale, transfer. Adai Mara, transfer. Elliot Cadeau, transfer. Morez Johnson, transfer. The only, you want to call it homegrown team, homegrown player on this team, Trey McKinney, who I mentioned, true freshman this year from Orchard Lake St. Mary's in Flint. So not only a homegrown player in terms of, he started his collegiate career with you, but also a local Michigan guy. But when the majority of your primary guys in this team, in this NCAA tournament run, are transfers, I don't know, I'm not putting an asterisk on this by any means, but I think this Michigan team, in the grand scheme of things, is going to be talked a little bit differently in the long run, especially you see that recent Donald Trump executive order, trying to cap some of this stuff in college sports, limiting to 1 transfer without having to miss any time and limiting you to a maximum of 5 years. I know the last couple of years have been a little bit of an exception with COVID being in there, and that definitely changes some things with some of these players in terms of eligibility, which we're pretty much going to be over that now in terms of all the players that were in college at that time, pretty much all out of college now. That was 5 years ago. So, I don't know. We'll see. But obviously, NIL is still going to be a thing. And does this set the standard of, big money teams out there being the, kind of blueprint, at least for the next couple of years? Who wins the transfer portal as opposed to who wins the scouting? Is that going to be the precedent? I don't know. We're going to have to probably wait a few years to have that question fully answered. But I think definitely has a case to be made to be mentioned in some of the more dominant teams, at least in the last 25 years, since the turn of the century. And I think more on that has to be determined by, how many of these players make it to the NBA. And even for that matter, how many make an impact in the NBA. So, regardless, amazing team for U of M. One of the most dominant NCAA tournaments we've seen. And it was fun to follow all season. U of M winning their first championship in 37 years. And it was a pretty exciting finish with that defensive bloodbath, that defensive battle against UConn, who had won 2 of the last 3 national championships coming into this year. Good stuff for the Maize and Blue.
If you missed today's installment of On the Docket, podcast it at foxsports1019.com or wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to tune in live weekdays at noon on Jackson's Fox Sports 101.9 FM.